This is Patrick Tetzloff with another episode of Design Department's Triumphs and Blunders. In this series, we look at some of the greatest accomplishments as well as the biggest failures in product design. And in today's episode, we are examining a success story. This is a story of an outsider who came in and reshaped an entire market segment by launching a product that was so revolutionary, the industry would never be the same. Now, we need to travel back in time to a small factory just outside of Vienna, Austria, the year 1980. A middle-aged engineer named Gaston managed a family-owned radiator factory. And as a small side business, he and his wife also made brass fittings for doors and windows. Now, the side business expanded and eventually included Gaston providing knives and bayonets to the Austrian military. As the story goes, Gaston was visiting the Ministry of Defense one day, and he overheard a conversation between two frustrated colonels. You see, for years, the Austrian military had been trying to replace their outdated World War II-era pistols with no success. Now, Gaston asked the colonels if he could bid on the project. His request was met with laughter. I mean, after all, how could a supplier of door hinges, knives, and curtain rods design something as complicated as a handgun? But Gaston was still confident enough to press forward, and he asked the colonels for the design requirements, and the ministry, although skeptical, gave Gaston the go-ahead to create a prototype and submit a bid. Now, Gaston wasn't a firearms manufacturer. In fact, he wasn't even a firearms enthusiast. As an adult, he didn't even own a gun. But this drove him to carefully study existing handguns. He dove into their construction, and because he had no existing bias, he was able to keenly assess their strengths and weaknesses. Now, let me make a point here. This step is often skipped by companies who feel they have a solid understanding of their competition, but this causes them to miss innovations which are happening right before their eyes. Now, back to Gaston, who then gathered a group of professional shooters and firearms enthusiasts, and he asked them, "Describe the pistol of the future." Then he studied how they handled their guns, and he asked them to give him guidance on size, weight, capacity, and even comment on reliability. You see, Gaston wanted to learn as much as possible about user needs by talking to actual users. And again, this is another important lesson we can learn, because too often as designers and engineers, we convince ourselves that we know what the customer wants, yet we don't even ask the customer. Now, this requires a bit of humility, but it often reveals that there are unexpected ways the customers use the products that we design. Now, Gaston, after completing multiple iterations of design, prototyping, and testing, landed on iteration number 17. Gaston felt he finally had a product which was worthy of presenting. And on May 19, 1982, Gaston Glock presented 4 samples to the Austrian Ministry of Defense. And Gaston called his handgun the Glock 17. And the Glock 17 contained a multitude of innovative and some controversial features. One of its defining characteristics, a plastic frame, was almost unheard of at the time. The plastic frame enabled design flexibility, which resulted in a lighter gun with fewer components, and could also be produced at a lower cost. Glock's pistol went on to dominate the Austrian handgun evaluation, and he was awarded nearly 90 of a possible 100 points by the evaluators. And Glock also went on to dominate the US law enforcement market, displacing the revolver as the standard sidearm for officers and agents across the country. Now, we can take 3 major insights from Glock's story. The first takeaway is that an outside perspective often reveals insight which insiders can miss. The second takeaway is that we should always be seeking to better understand our customers' needs as expressed by actual customers. We should ask questions. We should make observations. We should put ourselves in the user's shoes, because the more we understand about our customers, the better we can design products that fit the unmet user needs. And the third and final point is that sometimes to change an industry, you simply have to remove some of the constraints which are limiting your team's creativity. Because Gaston Glock, an unknown middle-aged Austrian engineer, ended up turning an entire industry on its head by disrupting the status quo from the outside.